My brother told me to stand near the wall at his wedding so I wouldn't ruin the photos, then watched me pull a $1,500 check out of my jacket pocket and tear it in half in front of 37 guests. Here's what makes this insane. I'm the cosigner on their house. The person Nate calls when his credit gets declined. The brother who's covered his car, payments, his security deposits, and his emergency expenses for 3 years while he builds his perfect Instagram life with Brianna. But at their vineyard wedding, the one I helped pay for, I was literally positioned like a piece of furniture that didn't match their aesthetic. "Can you stand near the wall?" the photographer had asked, not really asking. "We're going for very clean lines today." Clean lines, like my 31 years of being the reliable brother. The financial safety net, the person who co-signed his mortgage when no bank would touch his credit score, like all of that could be cropped out for better photo composition. The contradiction hit me while I watched them arrange the important family for pictures. Mom got prime placement next to the bride. Dad stood proudly behind Nate. Extended family clustered around like they'd contributed something meaningful to this moment. I stood by the stone barrier holding a wedding gift worth more than most people's monthly rent, realizing I was being treated like a background extra in my own family. Brianna had said it herself earlier, background extras don't photograph well. So I decided background extras don't write checks either. That $1,500 gift was just the beginning. Because when you're someone's cosigner, you don't just withdraw a wedding present, you withdraw their entire financial foundation. And when your family has spent 3 years treating you like you're invisible, making yourself actually invisible has consequences they never saw coming. The photographer wanted clean lines. I was about to give them the cleanest line of all. The one between family who respects you and family who hookup uses you. Apparently cosigners don't photograph well, but they sure know how to make an exit. Let me explain how I became Nate's invisible aita. 3 years ago, when Nate wanted to buy the house with Brianna, his credit score was somewhere south of acceptable. Mine wasn't. So when the bank said they needed a cosigner with established financial history, guess who got the call? "It's just a formality," Nate had said. "You know I'm good for it." I signed because that's what older brothers do. I covered the 6 months of reserves the bank required when their application almost got rejected. I handled the down payment gap when their dream home turned out to cost more than they'd budgeted. By the time they got the keys, I was financially tangled up in their perfect life in ways that had no exit strategy. The monthly mortgage, $2,847. When Nate's freelance income got unpredictable, I covered the shortfalls. When his car payments overlapped with wedding expenses, I handled those too. Emergency dental work, security deposits. The engagement ring he couldn't quite afford, all of it flowed through me like I was a bank that never charged interest or asked questions. I'd been the cosigner on Nate's life for 3 years. But Nate and Brianna had perfected the art of making their financial dependency invisible. Social media told a different story, weekend getaways, designer, furniture restaurant check-ins, that suggested they were living well within their means. Brianna's Instagram featured carefully staged shots of their cozy home and blessed life that never included the behind-the-scenes reality of who actually made it possible. They curated their image like gallery owners, selecting only the pieces that enhanced the narrative. Struggles were edited out. Help was cropped from the frame. Success was presented as organic, self-generated, earned. Nate got the credit for really having his life together. Brianna got praised for landing such a stable guy. I got text messages asking if I could cover things just this once that had become a monthly routine. Perfect Instagram posts don't pay for themselves. The pattern had been set years before the wedding. I was the foundation that kept their structure stable, but foundations are supposed to be underground, invisible, taken for granted until something goes wrong. Family gatherings, holiday dinners, birthday parties. I watched Nate get congratulated for his achievements while I handed him the receipts in private. When relatives asked how he afforded the house, he talked about smart financial planning and building good credit. When they admired his lifestyle, he smiled like he'd earned it entirely on his own. I was always good enough to solve problems, never good enough for photos. Being reliable didn't make me valued, it made me convenient. The person you call when something breaks, the name you put on documents when you need credibility. The brother who handles the unglamorous parts so the public parts can look effortless. And it worked because I was good at being invisible. I never asked for credit or acknowledgement. I just kept the machine running smoothly, quietly in the background where reliable people belong. Until the day I realized that being in the background had become my permanent address and I was paying rent on a place I didn't want to live anymore. The morning of the wedding, I actually felt optimistic. I'd driven 2 hours to the vineyard wearing the suit Nate had specifically requested, navy blue, to match the color palette, carrying the wedding gift I'd spent weeks choosing. $1,500 felt like a lot, but this was supposed to be the family celebration where all the behind-the-scenes support finally made sense. Where being the dependable brother actually counted for something. The venue was beautiful. Rolling hills, string lights already being tested, chairs arranged in perfect rows facing an altar decorated with white flowers and greenery. Everything looked expensive, curated exactly like the Pinterest boards Brianna had been sharing for 18 months. I found Mom setting up the guestbook table and she smiled when she saw me. "Oh, good you're here early." Nate was worried about the timeline. "Happy to help," I said, and I meant it. "Where do you want me?" That's when the photographer appeared, a woman with a clipboard and the kind of confidence that comes from managing other people's most important day. She looked me up and down like she was cataloging inventory. "You're the brother?" she asked. "The older brother," I confirmed. She made a note on her clipboard. "Okay, we'll work with that." The photographer looked at me like I was a furniture problem. 20 minutes later, as guests started arriving and the photographer began staging pre-ceremony shots, everything became clear. "Can you stand near the wall?" she said, not really asking. Her voice had that tone people use when they're being polite about something that isn't actually a request. I looked around. The family was gathering for photos near the altar, Mom, Dad, Nate looking nervous but happy in his perfectly fitted tuxedo, Brianna radiant in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "The wall," I repeated. "Right there by the stone barrier," she said, pointing to a spot that was clearly outside the main photo area. "We're going for very clean lines today, very curated aesthetic. Clean lines, like I was a smudge that needed to be managed. Like 31 years of being Nate's financial safety net could be cropped out for better composition." "This is for family photos," I said. "Exactly," the photographer said, "and some family fits the aesthetic better than others. Stand near the wall, it's better for the clean lines." Standing by that stone wall, I felt the weight of the envelope in my jacket pocket differently. $1,500. The number had felt generous when I wrote it meaningful, when I signed it appropriate for someone who'd helped make this day financially possible. But now positioned like decor that didn't quite match the theme, the math felt different. I pulled out the check and looked at it. "Pay to the order of Nathan and Brianna Morrison. $1,500 and $100, my signature. The memo line, for your new beginning." The photographer was still arranging my family, my actual family, into poses that would look effortless and natural. Mom laughed at something Nate said. Dad adjusted his tie. Everyone looked comfortable included, like they belonged exactly where they were standing. Then Mom's voice carried over from the photo area light and practical, like she was correcting a chair. "Adam, could you move just a little more to the left? You're still visible at the edge of the frame." "Not come join us." "Not we need you in this shot." "Just move further away because you're accidentally in our picture." I looked at the checks again, then I folded it once slowly with careful hands. "Everything okay?" my cousin Melissa asked, approaching with that cautious look people wear when they sense something awkward forming. "Perfect," I said, just enjoying the clean aesthetic. Melissa glanced toward the photo session where the photographer was now directing my parents to lean in closer and show me those natural family smiles. "Are you not in the family photos?" she asked. "Apparently I don't fit the clean lines they're going for." Her expression tightened. "What does that even mean?" Before I could answer, Mom noticed us talking and walked over, eyes flicking to the photographer like she was worried I'd disrupt the timeline. "Adam honey," she said, voice set to reasonable. "You're being dramatic. It's just photos, you know how these things work." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue about visions. I pulled the check out again and held it up so Mom could see the amount. "Family that doesn't need me in the picture," I said evenly, "doesn't need me funding the picture either." Then quietly, cleanly, I tore the check in half. No flourish, no speech, just paper separating into two pieces while 37 guests pretended not to stare and absolutely stared anyway. Mom's mouth opened like she had a response prepared and suddenly forgot the words. Melissa went still beside me. I slipped both halves back into the envelope and returned it to my jacket pocket. Behind us, the photographer called for the next arrangement. The clean lines needed to stay clean. And I stood near the wall, calm as ever, realizing I'd finally stopped being part of their backdrop. That's when Brianna appeared. She glided over with the kind of smile brides perfect for managing situations that threaten their timeline. Bright, controlled, and absolutely determined to keep everything on track. Is everything okay over here? She asked, though her eyes were already scanning the entrance area, like she was measuring what didn't fit. Mom jumped in immediately. Adam's just having a moment about the photo arrangements. Oh, Brianna said, her smile tightening. Well, we put a lot of thought into the composition. We're trying to keep the shots really clean. Clean. There was that word again, polite on the surface, sharp underneath. She turned to me with the patient tone people use when they're explaining something obvious to someone who's being inconvenient. Adam, I hope you understand, she said. The photos need balance, spacing, symmetry. We can't have everyone in every frame or it stops looking intentional. Intentional, curated, aesthetic. I didn't argue, I didn't raise my voice, I just let her finish because she was saying the quiet part out loud with nicer words. And for the big family shots, she added, still smiling, it helps when everyone in the frame matches the look. That's all. I thought about the cosigner paperwork sitting in my filing cabinet at home. My name next to Nate's. My credit and income backing their mortgage. The bank didn't ask for clean lines. The lender didn't care about the color palette. When they needed credibility, my name fit perfectly. Cosigners carry the debt, not the respect. Brianna. I said, keeping my voice level. Quick question. When you applied for the mortgage on this house, whose name did you need on the paperwork? Her smile faltered for half a second, just enough to confirm I'd landed the point. That's different, she said quickly. How? That's financial, she replied. This is visual. I nodded once slow. So I'm good enough to guarantee the house. I said calm, but not good enough to stand with family in a photo. Adam, Mom cut in sharply, her eyes flashing warning. Stop making this about money. But it had always been about money, not greed, leverage. The fact that my reliability bought them the life they were posing inside, and now that same life required me to stay out of frame to look perfect. Behind Brianna, the photographer called for another arrangement. Okay, big family shot. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, people I barely knew got waved into place and repositioned for lighting and symmetry. Melissa got pulled forward with a polite hand gesture and a quick smile from the photographer, and I stayed where I'd been assigned near the wall outside the main photo area, like a piece of background that wasn't supposed to be noticed. Melissa glanced back at me for a split-second question in her eyes, then looked away when she saw Mom watching. The camera clicked. Another arrangement. Another click. Each one built the same message: I was useful when something needed fixing, but inconvenient when something needed photographing. Standing there, watching my family arrange themselves into memories I wouldn't be included in. I made a decision that felt as clean and final as the tear in that check. I wasn't going to fight for a spot in their frame. I was going to stop subsidizing the people who kept cropping me out. Background extras don't fund main characters. By the time the ceremony started, word had spread. Not through announcements or shouting, just the quiet way information moves through families when something shifts. Whispered questions, side glances, the kind of tension that makes people suddenly notice what they usually ignore. I sat where they'd placed me, third row aisle, close enough to look appropriate, but far enough not to interrupt any important sightlines, and watched Nate and Brianna exchange vows about building a life together, supporting each other through everything, being each other's foundation. The irony wasn't subtle. At the reception, guests drifted from ceremony seating to cocktail hour near the entrance, right past the photo booth backdrop and the neon sign that was already collecting selfies. I was at the bar when Mom cornered me, voice low, smile tight. Adam, she said, what you did with the check? That was childish. This is Nate's wedding day. I know exactly what day it is, I said evenly. I helped pay for it. She blinked like I'd said something inappropriate. You're being dramatic about a few photographs. I didn't argue about feelings. I didn't relitigate the wall. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, not to perform, just to show a pattern that had been hiding in plain sight. Mom, I said, tilting the screen, this is what you're calling a few photographs. Transfers labeled like routine errands, mortgage shortfall, insurance, vendor deposit, car payment gap. Month after month, small rescues mixed with big ones. The kind of steady support that doesn't look dramatic until it's listed in a row. And this, I added, flipping to a saved file, is what made their house possible. A screenshot of the mortgage portal. My name, my role cosigner. Mom stared at the screen like she was reading a foreign language. I didn't know, she said quietly. Because it was easier not to know, I said. It's easier to accept help when everyone pretends it isn't happening. That's when Dad joined us, holding 2 drinks and wearing the careful face he used when he smelled family politics. Everything all right, he asked. Adam's upset about the photos, Mom said automatically like it was the safest explanation. I'm not upset about the photos, I said, calm but clear. I'm done subsidizing people who treat me like furniture. Dad frowned. Subsidizing? I held the phone out. Not in his face, just in the space between us. The bank history, the labels, the cosigner proof. His expression changed as the story clicked into place. Jesus, Adam, he said under his breath, why didn't you say something? Say what I asked, that I was paying for the privilege of being kept out of frame. Mom's eyes moved between my screen and the room like she was suddenly seeing the wedding differently. Not as a celebration, but as a production with an invisible budget line. So you're stopping, she asked. I already did, I said. The panic that followed wasn't loud. Wedding panic never is. It's urgent murmurs and fast walking in formal shoes. It's someone disappearing toward the groom. It's people trying to solve a problem without making it visible. Dad handed Mom a drink and walked away to find Nate. Mom stayed frozen for a second, like her brain was trying to rewrite the family script in real time. And then Brianna appeared at my shoulder, smile, bright eyes, sharp voice, pitched for politeness. Adam, she said, I heard you were having concerns about financial arrangements. No concerns, I said, just changes. Changes. Her smile flickered. I kept my tone level, exactly as calm as hers. I won't be covering gaps anymore, I said. I won't be the backup plan, and I won't keep my name on anything that requires me to be invisible for the picture to look clean. Her eyes darted quick and calculating. What does that mean for... She stopped herself, trying to find wording that didn't sound like what it was. For your credit, I offered. Brianna went pale, not bridal pale, actually pale. And that was the moment I understood something new. The aesthetic had always been expensive. They just liked pretending I wasn't part of the cost. Before Brianna could recover, Melissa stepped up beside me, steady, unapologetic, like she'd been done watching this for a long time. Good for you, she said simply. Brianna snapped her attention to her. Excuse me. Melissa's smile stayed polite. Her voice didn't. Being reliable doesn't mean being disposable, she said, and being family doesn't mean being taken for granted. Then she glanced toward the photo booth, the perfect backdrop, the perfect lighting, the perfect curated story. You got your clean lines, Melissa added. Now you get to learn what that aesthetic costs when the person funding it stops blending in. I didn't pile on, I didn't gloat. I just stood there with my phone in my hand, bank history, cosigner proof, and a boundary that finally had paperwork behind it. And right on cue, my screen lit up. A text from Brianna, short enough to be honest. You really ruined everything. A second text followed a minute later from Mom, softer but familiar. Family means making sacrifices. I stared at both messages for a beat. Then I locked my phone. Because for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't going to sacrifice myself just to keep their picture clean. The drive home from the reception gave me 2 hours to think clearly. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew what Monday morning would look like. Calls from Mom, texts from Nate, maybe Dad showing up to talk this out before it got real. Family crisis mode where everyone suddenly wants a solution to a problem they've been comfortably ignoring for 3 years. But I was done being the solution to problems I didn't create. I opened my laptop and started a list, not an emotional list, a practical one. Lock down my money. No more just this once transfers. No more recurring safety nets that made their life feel effortless. I checked every auto transfer and every template I'd ever saved for Nate and Brianna and disabled them. If a payment went out of my account, it would be because I chose it on purpose, not because a habit kept running. Cosigner reality check. I couldn't just remove my name. Cosigners don't get to walk away with a click, but I could stop acting like the backup plan and start treating it like what it was, liability. I drafted a short factual email for Monday 1 that didn't argue about feelings or photos. It just stated the boundary I would no longer cover shortfalls and any future missed payments were not authorized to be pulled from me by default. Paper trail, timestamp, clean and boring, exactly the kind of record families hate because it can't be rewritten later. Get professional answers fast. Monday morning, I scheduled time with the lender to ask about the only paths that actually exist: cosigner release, if they qualified refinance into their names only, and alerts so I'd know immediately if anything went late. I didn't need drama. I needed visibility and time. Sunday night, I created another kind of protection documentation. I went through Nate and Brianna's Instagram accounts systematically and screenshotted the story they'd been selling: house post vacations, blessed captions, the curated proof that their life was thriving, while the behind-the-scenes funding stayed cropped out like me. I saved everything into a folder labeled Receipts. Then I added the 2 texts that mattered most, the ones that told the truth in 1 sentence each. Brianna. You really ruined everything. Mom family means making sacrifices. Not because I planned to post anything, because if they tried to rewrite me as the villain later, I wanted the timeline frozen in place. Monday morning, I called my bank first, then a lawyer. The bank helped me set safeguards alerts on anything tied to that mortgage, tighter controls on transfers, and a clear boundary between my accounts and anyone else's emergencies. The lawyer was even simpler. How long have you been financially supporting them? 3 years, and you have no written repayment agreement. No, then you're not obligated to keep giving them money, she said. And if you want this to end cleanly, everything from here on out needs to be in writing. Cleanly. Clean lines, clean boundaries, clean exits. Tuesday. I practiced the part I'd always been worst at, saying no without explaining myself. No, I can't cover that. No, I won't be doing that anymore. No. At first it felt like speaking a language I'd only ever heard other people use, but it got easier every time I said it, shorter, steadier, less negotiable. Because I knew the calls were coming. The emergencies that always appear right when boundaries get set. The crises designed to test whether I meant it or whether I was still the background extra who'd step back into the frame when the picture started to wobble. For the first time in my adult life, I was ready to let other people solve their own problems. The family meeting happened at the vineyard. Not in a dining room, not later, not somewhere private where everyone could rewrite it afterward. It happened at the end of the reception, right by the exit doors where people funnel out past the last string lights and the last polite smiles. The same wedding that had been built on clean lines was about to get one messy truth who had been paying for the picture. Mom got there first, moving fast, in Heel's mediator voice already loaded. We need to talk through what happened today, she said. Find a way to move forward that works for everyone. I made my position clear, I said evenly. Dad stepped into my path, not aggressive, just blocking the exit the way parents do when they still believe they can stop consequences with tone. Adam-san, he said, lowering his voice. Help us understand what you need. What would make this right? What I needed like this was a negotiation. I don't need anything, I said. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just done providing things. Nate finally spoke. He looked like someone trying to keep a lid on a situation that was already leaking. Adam, come on, he said. You know I'm good for it. You know I always pay things back eventually. Eventually? 3 years of eventually. When I asked, when have you ever paid me back? I kept my voice calm, almost curious, like I was asking for a detail he could easily produce if it existed. Nate's eyes flicked to Mom, to Dad, to Brianna. No one filled the silence. I mean, we're family, Nate said, reaching for the script. We help each other. We don't keep score. Right, I said, we don't keep score, which is why you never had to face the cost of your choices. Brianna stepped in, smile, sharp words controlled, same timeline management energy she'd worn all day. This is insane, she said. We never asked you to. Yes, you did, I said, still calm. You asked me to co-sign. You asked me to cover gaps. You asked me to be the backup plan. And today you asked me to stand near the wall so the photos stayed clean. I let that hang for half a second because behind them guests were drifting out. People were close enough to hear without me raising my voice. I took out my phone not to perform, not to threaten, just to reference what couldn't be argued with. Here's the pattern, I said, showing the same bank history from earlier. Transfers, shortfalls covered, deposits, the steady, unglamorous math behind their curated life. And here's the part that matters, I continued, the co-signer part. Nate swallowed. Brianna's eyes went to my screen like it was a medical report. This isn't about a check, I said. The check was just the cleanest way to make the boundary visible. I kept my tone factual, almost administrative. No more gap coverage. No more just this once. No more emergency money running through me. And going forward, anything tied to my name gets handled in writing. You want the life you've been posing inside. You get the version you can afford without me blending into the background to hold it up. The silence that followed wasn't anger. It was math. Nate's face changed like someone watching a calculator total a number they didn't want to see. I can't, he started, then stopped, voice smaller than it had been all day. If anything goes wrong, without you backing it up. There it is, I said quietly. Not cruel, just honest. Brianna's control cracked for a second. Families don't just cut each other off over wedding photos. You're right, I said. They cut each other off when one person spends years carrying the weight and gets treated like they're too inconvenient to be seen. Dad cleared his throat, trying one last time to turn it into a deal. What would it take for you to reconsider? For the first time I smiled, not meanly, just the way people smile when they realize they've finally stopped being moved by guilt. An apology would be nice, I said, but it wouldn't change anything. Because this wasn't about hurt feelings anymore. It was about what I was willing to pay for. And I wasn't willing to pay to be treated like furniture. Behind them, the reception kept glowing string lights, laughter, curated memories being made. And at the exit doors, with my phone locked and my decision already documented, I stepped around them and walked out. For once, I wasn't standing near any walls. 6 months later, everything was different. Not dramatically, quietly. The way change actually happens when people stop performing and start being honest about what they can and can't do. Nate and Brianna kept the house, but barely. They refinanced into their names only after scrambling to prove they could handle the payments without a cosigner. The process took 3 months and cost them their vacation budget, their furniture upgrade plans, and the comfortable margin they'd gotten used to living with. But they managed it. Mom stopped using family helps family to explain away financial exploitation. Dad stopped assuming I'd automatically handle whatever went wrong. And Nate, for the first time since we were kids, started calling to ask questions instead of issuing expectations. "How do you budget for unexpected expenses?" he asked during a call in March. "You set aside money every month," I told him. "Like an adult." "Yeah," he said quietly, "I'm figuring that out." That was it. No guilt, no bargaining, just a grown-up sentence from someone who'd avoided grown-up math for years. The strangest part wasn't that our relationship improved, it was that it became a relationship instead of a service arrangement disguised as family obligation. At Mom's birthday dinner in April, they seated me at the main table. Not because someone announced it, not because anyone made a show of it, it just happened. Like my presence wasn't something that needed managing anymore. Melissa slid into the seat beside me, grinning. "Look at that," she murmured. "No walls in sight." I looked around the restaurant, another family celebration, another check coming at the end, another chance to watch the old pattern try to resurrect itself. But it didn't. Brianna didn't hover or redirect the conversation like a coordinator. She just talked, asked me a normal question about work, listened to the answer, no vision, no spacing, no quiet attempts to keep the frame clean. And when the check came, Nate reached for it before anyone could glance my way. "I got this," he said. He didn't say it like a performance. He said it like responsibility. The wedding photos on their Instagram still didn't include me, and I was fine with that. Because the point was never the picture. The Waller $500 check was never the point. The point was what happened the second I stopped paying to be a background extra. People either learn to see you or they learn to live without you. Either way, you stop disappearing into a role that was never meant to be permanent. The clean lines did get drawn in the end, just not through me. Around me. And for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged, at the table, in the conversation, taking up space without apologizing for it.